volunteer from the audience who could walk a mic around so that when we have a question from the audience, everyone can hear it and we can record it. We've got our microphone and camera that we're using to capture this event up here, and if you're not near that, it doesn't pick up. So we want to make sure that everybody can hear it, even though you can hear from the speakers above me, but it may not pick up properly with our recording equipment if we don't go through the microphone. Okay. Well, I guess we'll have to.
Yeah.
Make it. Okay, Charlie, you can do that? Charlie, okay.
My wife volunteered me.
Good, Carolyn, you're right on top of this, thank you very much. Okay, well, let's get started then. Does anyone have a question they would like to start out with? Oh, this is gonna be an interesting night. Yes, wait a minute. Charlie, can you get the microphone over there?
Raise your hand. You're right here, right?
We're gonna test your ground speed. Are there any current updates on Windows 11 that we haven't heard this month?
Ooh, yeah, there was a big update that just came out, and it appears that it has an awful lot of things that are part of it, and they're bringing back some things that were missing, and they're also expanding some items. And I just saw something just before I walked in here that said that this new update in Windows 11 is going to change Microsoft Office forever. Now, I don't know what that means. You know, forever doesn't sound real good sometimes, but we'll have to see. And I don't know what those items are. Excuse me. The fellow back here in the pink shirt, maybe he would have an answer. You know what's new in 11? Okay. Okay, I'm sorry. You're not the individual I was thinking of. I think I did that to you last time, didn't you? You're Howard, aren't you? Yeah, you're not the fellow I was talking about. Okay.
Mary,
Yes.
I've got Windows 11 and I get my updates automatically. Don't you get yours automatically? In other words, when I shut down, it'll tell me that they're waiting to load an update. And do I want to load it now and shut off at the end or what? So I don't have any problem.
I don't think that's his question, though. I think the question is, what are the updates that have just been added to Windows 11, and when are we going to know what they do? So I don't know what they are, and well, we can certainly do an internet search and find out. But yes, the Windows 11 just put out some very large updates, and I really don't know what they are. Let me look at that. While is there somebody else who would like to ask a question? And while you're asking the question, I'll sit down here and look up what's new in 11. Okay. Yes, Rosemary.
Do I need to wait for that?
Yes, you do.
There you go.
Mary, I don't know.
No, I think
What
it's
are you talking about?
Hold folks your local here.
okay.
But I think I'm under something.
You're either under something, or maybe it's your earrings, or
Whatever.
or somebody that
Today, you helped me understand better, when we go to the task manager and it says that our disk is running 100%.
Oh, yeah, okay. When you go into Task Manager, it will show you all of the stats related to your computer. It will tell you whether your processor is running at, 20% or 100%. It'll tell you whether your memory is, at 20% or 80% or whatever number. In some cases, that is dependent upon the hardware that you have and maybe the generation that you have. The situation we had today was, you're using 100% of disk, and maybe that wasn't because the disk was full. It may have been because the read-write to the disk was taking all of the data resources. If you have a computer that has 16 gigs of memory, you're going to go faster than a computer that has 4 gig of memory. And certainly one that maybe has 2 gig of memory. And some of the older computers that we have around have only 2 or 3 or 4 or even less memory. And so those can get bottomed down very quickly. The other thing is you need to look at the processor that you're using and the generation of that processor, and whether it's 4 threads or 8 threads or 2 threads. It could be a dual channel, which is only 2 threads. It could be a 4 channel, which is 4 lanes of traffic, or it could be 8, which gives you 8 lanes of traffic. And when I say traffic, think of it as a highway. If you have a highway that is 2 lanes and someone, and both lanes are filled and everybody's backed up, you're not going to be able to go around it because you can't really go on the berm, right? That's not a traffic lane. You have to wait until your turn. But if 2 more lanes open up, if you have 4 lanes, you've got many more cars that can go through in that same time frame. And if you have 8 lanes, that opens up even more. And so that's why it's important to know what you have on your computer and be able to read what you're seeing in Task Manager, because Task Manager will tell you how many channels you have. It'll tell you what is going down each one of those channels. It'll show you that you have, you may have, okay, on my computer, when I got it, it was an 8 gigabyte, 8 gigabytes of memory. And that was 2 different chips of one 8 gig and another 8 gig. I replaced one of those 8 gigs. I couldn't replace the other because it was soldered in. I replaced the second one with a 32 gig. Now I did gain a lot of memory. I went from 16 gig to 40 gig, but only 16 of those are dual channel dual channel. But we still have multiple threads on those channels. But the other 24 is single. So everything going off to, after I get through that first 16, it's going to offload into that other area that is single thread. And so it's going to go slower. So think about what you have. I've got dozens, I've actually got more than 100 tabs open in my browser. It's not recommended. Most of the computers that our members have wouldn't support that. I've never had a problem with any computer I've had because I've always tried to maximize the specs to it so that I would be able to handle multiple things. But for most of you would never worry about that. You'd have 2 or 4 or 10 or 20 tabs open and you'd be just, moving along without any problems. But yes, take a look. And also when you go into Task Manager, go into the tab that's called Startup and see what you have, that every time you start up your computer, you have to load before you can start doing anything. If you have, okay, a lot of people, I open up their computers, they have Skype open. Well, they hardly ever use Skype or they never use Skype. So why in the world would be added at startup? They have Macrium loaded at startup. You don't need Macrium at startup. You only need Macrium when you're doing a backup. They have they have their browser come up automatically when they start up. You don't need it open immediately. You go to it after everything has come up, go to it then. It means that your computer comes up more quickly and you'll be able to access things more quickly. So what I do when on my computer, I have closed down, I've disabled everything except Windows Defender. That's the antivirus program that Windows has embedded in the operating system. So I have that open, and I also opened up some maintenance items that are specific to my computer. If you have an HP, there will be an HP, I think it's called HP Smart or something like that, that is a manager of the HP product. Yeah, you might want to keep that one in the startup. I have the LG, what do they call it? The LG service center or whatever they call it. I have that also in my startup. That's the only thing I have in my startup. Everything else I have disabled. It doesn't mean I can't get to it. If I want to open Skype, I still have it on my computer. I've never used it, so why in the world would I have it set up and say in my startup? And okay. So do we have any other questions, or do you have any more comments related to anything that we've been doing?
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, well, I found an interesting,
Lost my job.
you lost your job. Well, you get it back, because I'm sure we'll have more questions later, but I saw a presentation yesterday that was talking about all the different ports that you have on your computer. You look at your computer, you have USB ports, you have HDMI ports, you have audio ports, you have a power port, you have a power plug in place. So all of these things that are on here have a purpose. So I thought I might take a few minutes and go over some of those items on your computer so you understand what their purpose is and why they're there. And I'm not going to go through, I mean, I copied all of the graphics that I could out of that video, but I didn't capture the whole video. So I'm just going to go through some of the slides and talk about the different items. And I'm not going, there's a lot of text on some of these, I'm not going to be reading through that. But I will discuss it. There we go. Okay, so we're going to look at all the different ports, and you can see on the back of this machine, you can see in the center, you can see 4 USB ports, and on the far side, you'll see an HDMI, and beside that, you have, I believe those are D-Link ports. I've never used a D-Link port. And then the one next to it, the one in green, the one that looks like a trapezoid in green, that's a VGA port. That's where your monitor would connect. In the middle, next to that, before the USB ports, you have a green and a pink, and that is for like your keyboard and your mouse. Over just before the silver grill, you'll have an Ethernet port. That's where that cable that looks like a telephone cable, but it's not. It's a little larger than that. It's called an RJ45. The one that goes in your phone is called an RJ11. It's just a number of pins, and that's the only reason for that designation. So don't worry about the numbers or anything. Below that, you can see there are 2 more USB ports. Now you notice there's a difference in the column of 4. they look like they have a little blue tab. And the ones below the Ethernet port or the RJ11 port, those have black tabs. Sometimes you'll see them that they'll have white tabs. The ones with the black or white tabs are usually, not always, usually USB 2.0 ports. Their speed is what, 480 megabytes or something. It's a slower port than the USB 3 port, which are the blue ports. The 3.0 ports are much faster. You can get gigabit speeds there. Matter of fact, you can get depending upon the version of that port, you could get up to 40 gigabits per second. Then you move over and you find this thing that has the 3 prongs. That's your power supply. That's where you put the cord in and then you plug it into the wall. And yeah,
Wiggle the HDMI cable a little bit. Picture on the screen is dark.
We can't really make out what you're talking.
oh, okay. Well, I'll tell you, that's probably,
Nice. It's a connection.
okay. Let me try a couple of other things here. I also, let me get out of here for a minute. I also have another thing that I have on that may be causing that. Let me get out of this. And let's bump this up. Okay, I've got that all the way up. Okay. Yeah.
You almost had it.
Yeah, that's why I have that other program that dims the screen, because if I don't, it totally blinds me.
Yeah, that's better.
Wow. Oh, I don't like that. That's not a good thing. You should never be able to see that. And I don't think I've seen that on this computer before, so let me get this running again.
We're getting no signal.
Yeah.
Okay.
My computer screen, if I don't tone it down, is like sitting with the sun sitting in my eyes. So I have something that reduces that, and that may be interfering with the projection.
That's better.
Okay. So let's. Oh, I'm sorry, projected, that's good. So. Okay, that looks brighter from here.
That much.
Okay,
At least we can see the that's black. Yeah. We'll see what's better.
it is, but the quality of what I was taking it from was not really great, so I wondered whether to do it at all without upscaling the graphics, but I decided to go ahead and take what I had. And they had a gray screen, and so it's not as bright as it would have been otherwise. But anyway, going back, if you look at the center section, you see the two little round, the green and the pink. Those are for the PC, I think they were the PS2 connections, which were for the keyboard and the mouse. And beside that, you have 4 USB ports, and they're all blue. The ones at the bottom, next to it, coming from the bottom up, the first two, one from the bottom, are black as opposed to the blue. The black are slower USB ports, and the blues are faster USB ports. So they're more modern, so that would be very good. And again, the power is the prong that has 3 prongs over there. That's where you put your power cord in, and then you plug it in the wall. Sometimes we've had people that have come in and said, you know, I'm just not getting any power to my desktop anymore. It was working fine with it. Well, they bumped it, and that came loose. Always check your connections. Make sure your connections are in there properly so that they are you're not losing power to the unit itself. Okay, and if you have ports on your computer, which are similar to what I have on mine, you have these rounded ports, they're USB-C ports, but these, the ones with the lightning bolt, those are also Thunderbolt ports. So Thunderbolt is a new, well, it's been around for maybe 15 years or so, but the Thunderbolt port is faster than the USB-A port is, even in the C version. And Thunderbolt 3 is what mine has on my machine. Newest version of Thunderbolt is 4, just came out this year. And the Thunderbolt 3 gives you speeds of up to 40 gigabits per second. And the the Thunderbolt 4 goes up to 80 gigabits per second. So that's very fast. And you can take something that is 20 gigabyte and you can transfer it in just a few seconds as opposed to several minutes or hours as it used to be. So and then we have the USB Type-C, which looks exactly the same as a Thunderbolt tab. Wait a minute, let me get some of my cables out here. And you're not going to be seeing this from any distance anyway. But it's this small rounded shape, and this is USB-C. This is what we are currently using for most electronics in the last few years, last 3 to 5 years. And it's becoming more and more available on new products. If you get a new machine and it doesn't have a USB port on it, you don't want to buy that machine. Now, we may have a refurbished machine that comes, you know, from our supply that may not have a USB-C port, but that would be different. That's an older generation computer that we have refurbished and brought back to life and given it, I think you're here. I didn't even recognize you. That looks great. Anyway, so USB-C is rounded on all sides. It looks a little bit like the micro USB port that you might have on Android devices, but it doesn't have any square sides, and you can put it in either direction. USB, the micro USB, you can only put in one direction. It is rounded on the, kind of rounded on the top, but it's flat on the bottom. And again, you can always use a USB you can use the same, you can use a USB-C cable in a USB-C port or a Thunderbolt port, but it will only go to Thunderbolt speeds if it is truly a Thunderbolt port, and if you have a cable that is specified to that speed also. Okay, so this is what the Thunderbolt port will, or cable will look like, and you see that it has that electric symbol on the top. So if you see that, then you know it's a Thunderbolt. Looks like a Thunderbolt. And they are different. You can always use a Thunderbolt cable in a USB-C port, but it won't necessarily make it any faster. But you can't, and you can use a USB-C port cable in a Thunderbolt port, but if the cable is not up to Thunderbolt speeds, it again will not go any faster. USB type A is the one we're most familiar with, and it looks like you can see the little rectangular box, and the one at the top is also a USB. That looks more like a D connector to me, but anyway, that's another USB port. And that's been around for 30 years. Now we go down to the Ethernet port, Ethernet cable, and we talked about the RJ45, which is what this is. It just means it has a whole lot of connectors. The RJ11, which is the one for telephones, has fewer connectors. And this one is just a little bit larger. They are not interchangeable. Now, if you have a laptop, you're going to have a connector that is probably in two parts. You're going to have a part like this one does that has a, see the box here? That is something that translates AC to DC. And it also provides some buffering electronics internally. You'll have two separate cables. You'll have one that goes to your device, and you'll have another one that plugs into this that goes to the wall to get power from the wall. And some of them use USB-A, some of them use USB-C, that use different connectors. Now, if you have a desktop, you're going to have that 3-prong plug. And I just learned yesterday that that's called a kettle plug. Now, I think that's because it's been around for generations. I mean, it's been around since what, the 40s, the 50s? It probably was first used on a kettle, an electric kettle. So that's why it's called a kettle plug. That's my assumption. That doesn't mean that that's the origin of that. That's my assumption that that's why it's called a kettle, because it doesn't look like a kettle. And we also have another plug that is common, and it's called the clover leaf. And you'll see those 3 little prongs down at the bottom for one end of it that goes into a block like this, and the other end goes into the wall. And that's called a clover leaf. It has 3 ports. I'm certain they thought that it looked like a clover leaf, so that's why they named it that. Now, in most laptops, you will have some kind of a barrel connector. And barrels can come in all sizes. It can come in very large size and in very small sizes. And the only thing wrong with these very small ones, I'm always afraid they're going to break. So be very careful when you put them in and take them out. Don't let them break inside. If you do happen to break it off, you may have a problem internally in getting that out, and you certainly would have to replace this end, which may also be attached to that power brick. And if it's attached to the power brick, then you have to replace both. Can't replace just one, but some of them actually have the barrel cable separate from the brick, and so you have 2 different cables to go. There's a cable that is specific to a MacBook Pro. It's called a MagSafe. And it's very similar to another magnetic cable that is used by Microsoft on their Microsoft Surface products. And unfortunately, for this and for the Surface, it doesn't have an alternate way of powering. Now, mine, even though it has a barrel connector, it also has a Thunderbolt port that has power delivery, which means that is an alternative way for me to power this laptop. So those are things that if you're buying a new computer, you might want to look into. What ways can I power this up? Am I limited to a certain kind of connector? Does it have only one way to do it? They have multiple ways. And if it has a Thunderbolt port, is that the only Thunderbolt port? Do you have one or two? If I was looking for a new computer and I was interested in speed, which if you're looking at transferring files, you would definitely want to get the fastest you could today. And to do that, I would look for the Thunderbolt speeds and I would look for multiples of that. Now, this has multiple USB 3s, which are also at the same speed as a Thunderbolt 3 port. So I have a Thunderbolt 3 port and two USB-C 3 ports, and all of them are 40 gig ports. The upgrade to both of those specifications, USB-C 4 and Thunderbolt 4, both go, I think they both go to 80. They may not both go to 80, but I think they both go to 80. So that's doubling again. Now, when we started out with the first USB-A ports, they were not really very fast. They were, well, if we're comparing it to the 40 gig, we would say they're not a tenth, they're maybe a hundredth of that speed. So you think about the gain we've had over the years. And then we're looking at how do we connect a monitor? There's several ways of connecting monitors. And those are done, this particular port is what would be used for this device. No, actually this one uses a D connector, which is faster than the VGA. And it has, I don't know that it has the same, but it has similar characteristics of the HDMI port that most of us are familiar with. And certainly if you have a newer TV, you're going to have an HDMI connection as opposed to doing it as a VGA connection. And most of the newer computers are coming out with HDMI, and it's very hard to even find a VGA port on a newer laptop. Each generation of laptops, they try to reduce the size of the ports and increase the speed and the performance. So that's what this is indicating. Now you see that this port over here on the let's see, it'd be on the far left. That is the plug that you would see on your device. On the other end that plugs into it, that would be from your monitor to the laptop or desktop. You would have the male plug that has the enclosure around it. So you can see the pins out, or the socket that you're taking, that would be the receptacle. Okay, display port, that's the one that this one is using. It is commonly found on computers, but I've never seen one on a TV, and I've never seen one on, I've never had a laptop that had one either. But this PC does have it, and it's a very good solution for video. It's much better than the VGA port. You notice down here on the far right hand side, you'll see that it kind of looks like the letter D, an elongated D, and it looks a lot like the HDMI port also, but the two are not interchangeable. But the display port can go up to 32 gigabytes of gigabits, excuse me, of speed as far as streaming. So that's a much better way of distributing the data than a VGA would be. Okay, HDMI type A. This is a 19-bit pin connector. And currently we have 48 gigabits of speed in the 2.0 standard. And we also have the capability of running some gaming machines and so forth using the later specification. If you're trying to look at the different kinds of HDMI ports, you have the standard HDMI port, which is just a little bit larger than than what you would find elsewhere. You have a mini HDMI, which is almost the same size, but it's much smaller in height. And then you have the micro HD, which you would find on a lot of newer computers, laptops especially, and on some of your other devices. And if you look at tablets, you will typically find a micro HDMI port as opposed to a regular HDMI, standard HDMI. And then if you look at the VGA, you see the red circle there, that is what you would see on the back of a desktop computer. And if you have an older laptop, you may also have a VGA port, which means that some of your older monitors could be used directly without having to have an adapter. We have at home, we have a monitor that's a VGA monitor, but we want to plug it into a laptop that has an HDMI port. So we have a very small adapter. It's just a little device that looks like this little thing that I have stuck inside this. And it gives us the ability to plug the HDMI cable into the VGA port and use that same monitor that's been used for 10 or 15 or 20 years. So why throw it away if we can still use it? If you look at the side of your laptop, over here in the red, you'll see the two jacks, one's for your headphone and one's for microphone. You have a slot beside that. It's a memory card slot. So if you have an SD card or something that you have in a camera, you can load that in to transfer photos or whatever. This has two USB ports, an HDMI port. It also has a VGA port, and it has a LAN port, that Ethernet port, LAN port, RJ35 port, whatever you want to call it. They're all the same. But what this gives you, this is one that will give you the opportunity to use some of those legacy machines, the older machines, with a newer product. So in a lot of the devices that we have in our office that are coming in, we refurbish and we pass on to our members. Those could have a VGA port and an HDMI port. This one has both. So it has both the modern HDMI port, which carries both video and audio, and it has a VGA port that carries only the video. Now, looking at the audio ports on a desktop, you would typically have 3 ports. And so you would have 2 of them for the dual channel headphones or sound bars or whatever. And you would also have a separate microphone port. Now, if you're connecting like a sound bar or something to a modern TV, you would probably not go through these audio cables. You would probably do it through the HDMI to that device, and it would carry the sound to that device, and you would use the ARC channel, that's audio return channel. for your sound bar. You also have a couple of other options on the top, on the optical side. You have the Toslink and the SPIF. And the Toslink was manufactured by Toshiba, and that's why it's called a Toshiba link. So Toslink is the abbreviation. The SPIF was by Sony, so that's the Sony's way of connecting the audio signal. And the Sony Philips, that's why it's SP, Sony Philips, and it's the digital interface, so the digital interface, IF. And the only difference in the two really is the naming convention. They both do the same thing. And I think that the ports will support either the Toslink or the SPIF cable. Now you have another little side port on your laptop, and it doesn't perform any function other than to lock the computer so that you can put a cable in there, tie it around a table leg or whatever, and someone won't be able to walk away with it from the office. If someone wanted to walk away with this, all they have to do is unplug these two cables and walk away with it. But it's in your home. You're not going to use a Kensington lock unless you have a lot of traffic through there, which I would doubt. Okay, some of the other cable or connections that you might see on the back of an older TV, you might see on the back of an older PC also. But these are all, you have this yellow orange is the digital audio out. You have a light blue that's the analog audio in, so that's an input. The top one is an output. The pink one is for microphone in. The green one is for audio out, and it's an analog sound, not digital sound. And then you have the bottom one, the black one, which is for surround sound, and it's an output also. So the two ports here in the middle that I talked about earlier, the PS2 ports, again, these are for things that the old keyboards and mice used that pin connection as opposed to the USB A ports. So if you have a keyboard and a mouse that are wired today, they would probably be USB connectors as opposed to a PS2 connector. If you were going to connect that keyboard and mouse to this desktop, I would not use any of those blue USB ports. Those should be reserved for higher speed devices. The mouse and keyboard are very low input devices, and they're very low speed devices. You don't need a lot of speed. I mean, even the fastest typist wouldn't go over the speed of that input port. So use the black ones for the keyboard and mouse. Use the blue ones for your data transfer. We also used to have a bunch of other kinds of ports. You can see what the ports look like and what the connectors look like. We used to have printers and also monitors that took serial or parallel ports. Some of the printers still do, but most would use some kind of different connector. But that's what the serial and parallel ports look like, and I've been using those kinds of cables since early 70s. And this again, this describes the serial port. The standard on that was the RS-232, and the only reason it was called an RS-232 is that was the name of the standard. And there were multiple versions of that. They typically came in 9-pin and 25-pin, but I've also seen them in 5-pin. So, and you would see the difference in the sizing based upon this serial port here is a 9-pin connector. But there's also a serial connector that looks very similar to that parallel connector that's shown here, because it was 25 pins. We also have another one called a Pigma card, a PC card. And this was a personal memory card you could get. It was kind of what you had before you had the USB drives, the flash drives. And you would use it maybe to fax things, you would use it for dial-up modems, you would use it for, you can see on here, this has 2 USB ports in it. This was a way to take a legacy device, an older device, and add USB ports to a device that didn't have them. Today, all computers that we see have the USB ports, and so this would be something you wouldn't see very often. I've also seen that particular port used on HP computers for a remote control. There used to be a Pigma card that you would slide in, and the power from the computer would power this remote control. You push in, slide in, pull it out, and it looked like a credit card with little buttons on it. And they were just, they were just small little bumps. You had to kind of feel your way sometimes. But that would be for you could use it kind of as a mouse sometimes, but usually it was more for like presentations, forward, back, skip, that kind of thing. You could use it as a multimedia device controller where you're skipping tracks, or you're skipping to the next song, you're increasing or decreasing volume. So it was a remote control that was attached to your PC. Whoops. So looking at all the different kinds of USB ports over the years, you'll see that you see this USB-C is what we have mostly on our computers today. And mostly our phones would be on that. Our tablets are probably the newer tablets will be that. Some of the older tablets will either be the Lightning port for Apple products, or the micro USB port for Android, and also I think the Windows also use that. This micro USB B port, it looks like a letter B, and it's it's something that you're going to find on some of the larger capacity hard drives and SSD drives that like I have a 5 terabyte drive that uses that to connect to a USB-C 3 port. So it's a faster speed. There's a mini B that doesn't quite look like a B to me, but that's what they call it, it's a B. And we have the other USB B port and a micro B port. But that one that says USB type B, I've also heard that one called USB type D. And it looks more like a D to me. And that's one you're going to find usually on the back of a printer. Okay, and then micro A, that picture doesn't really look like what I would call the A. The A has more rounded, has kind of a rounded top, kind of looks like an HDMI, very small one, but I don't think that's a good depiction of that port. Okay, again, the kinds of audio ports you might find on the back of your computer or on your TV. And these are the most common ports that you would find on a laptop. Okay, I'll take this and I'll put it on, put a link to it on our website, if Mark can do that for me. Okay. Very good. Now, does anybody have any questions since we have, oh, it's almost 7 o'clock. How about that? Do you have any questions before we go to our 7 o'clock meeting? Well, if you don't, then why don't I give you a little chance to take a break and we'll come back at 7 o'clock? Thank you.